Good morning, good morning. Any student of mine, former student I guess, is going to recognize this because I used to pass them out. And I'm happy to send any former student a replacement if you kept it and you lost your card. So this is very important to me as a concept just because I think it should guide you in life. Notice what lights you up. What lights you up can be anger sometimes. Sometimes it's joy, sometimes it's pleasure, sometimes it's a sense of injustice. Anyway, just wanted to say hi to my students by sharing that card. I know a lot of them enjoyed it, as did I. So last time I spoke about clay, and I talked about it in very loose and imprecise ways by talking about sand or impurities or whatever. But I think it's important to understand that for people who really study clays, and they can spend a lifetime studying clays, ceramic engineers really understand this substance at a molecular and even at an atomic level. And they understand how they're mixed, what their properties are, how different mixtures create different properties. So I do not use clay dug out of the ground. First, you have to clean it for one thing. A, I don't have a source. B, then you have to clean it because it's got composted leaves, it's got dead bugs, it's got bird poop. It's got a lot of stuff in it that you don't necessarily want. So you have to clean it, and then you have to strain it and do all kinds of things, and really that's a lot of time and effort, and I don't do it. So I purchased my clay, as I said, from Laguna. And so what most potters, not all, but what most potters use is a constituted clay that uses various minerals in very precise combinations that have been determined by people who study such things and understand how pliable it will be, how strong the final structure will be, also how high a temperature the clay can go to before it melts and collapses. So one of the real problems for some potters is somebody, if you have a shared kiln, somebody will put in a low fire clay into a high fire gas kiln, and the clay will literally melt all over the shelf, which is a disaster for everybody. So anyway, there are people who really study these things, so if you're interested in it, PM me and I can give you some really cool links to help you understand that. But most potters, we just want to make pots. So we're like quilt makers who, here's a fabric, it's got these qualities, it's thicker, it's thinner, it's jacquard, it's this color, and that's kind of how most potters think about clay. But I also find, frankly, the chemistry and the atomic structure of clay really interesting. So the next step that any potter does is to wedge the clay. So once you've chosen your clay, you've got a blob of clay, and you need to wedge it. And wedging it is basically accomplishing three things. The first thing that it does is it takes out bubbles. Because if you think about this, when you mush it into a ball, it's going to have lots of bubbles kind of hidden in it. And bubbles are a problem because when you throw, they create lumps that wreck your ability to throw. The other thing they do is if they make it through the throwing process and you have a pot but there's a bubble hidden in it, when it reaches high temperature in the kiln, it blows up because the air in the bubble expands at a different rate. Boom, your pot blows up in the kiln. Not fun. So you wedge to get rid of bubbles. The other thing you do is maybe you have different lumps that are of different levels of dryness and hardness, and you want one obviously consistent lump or ball of clay to work with. The third thing it does, which is a little more technical, is that clays are made of minerals that have an unusual structure. Maybe it's not that unusual, I don't know, I'm not a scientist. But their structure is that they are kind of flat and round and they stack. And so one of the things you're doing when you wedge is you may take some clay that these molecules are all at different angles, and you're trying to get them to kind of line up, because if they line up, you're going to be able to really throw them more easily than if you're trying to come out of something that's quite twisted up. So those are the three reasons we do it. Air bubbles, consistency of texture and dryness, and to make the throwing more fluid and easy. So I'm going to move this camera so you can see this. There are basically two kinds of wedging techniques that people use. One is called the goat's head, and I like to, if I have different clay textures, I like to start with the goat's head because it's really good at moving a lot of clay pretty quickly. And you move it in this way, and I'm going to just do a sort of a rough and easy thing here because I don't want to waste your time if you're here. And it becomes sort of two horns, a couple of eyes, and a snout. So they call that the goat's head. My more go-to way, once I have clays that are pretty consistent in terms of texture, is called a spiral. Now the spiral you do for all these reasons. Even it out, get rid of the bubbles, etc. Now the reality for me, I tend to do this about 100 times. Again, my personal gem. But it's accomplishing these things. So for instance, this is a drier piece, and that right there would have been a bubble. That would have been very unpleasant. But as you spiral it, you're taking the mineral compounds and you're kind of moving them in a way that's going to get them all to line up better and to work together better. There's another bubble. So I'm going to spare you seeing this 100 times, but what I will say is I have a dear friend who has asked me for 4 mugs. And I don't usually do things in sets because I just am not a set kind of gal. But I'm going to make her 4 mugs. And so I thought for these videos, I'll make some mugs. They're nice because they have, you know, the complexity of adding a handle, and they're very utilitarian. And on the other hand, they're fairly simple, unlike something like a teapot, which has a lid, a handle, a spout, a knob on the handle, and feet. Okay, thanks for joining. See you later. Bye.